We're joined by Paul Stone from Colonial Metals Group. Sir, thank you for joining us once again. I'd like to get your take on the House spending package and the bill that went into resolution and was ultimately passed. Somewhat of a surprise because it was just by that 217, 215 threshold. Shows how narrow that majority is for the Republicans.
Yeah, well, that was something to take note of. But they all voted for it except for one. You know, I'm torn. I'm a huge fan of Donald Trump. When I got to meet him at Mar-a-Lago at his first victory celebration, put together by Larry Kudlow's initiative that helped him and created some of the blueprint that got him back to a victorious situation with the White House rather than a cantankerous situation. I called him Braveheart. He's fighting an enemy that's already here. Sylvester Stallone had introduced him as the second coming of George Washington, but I told Mr. President Donald Trump that Washington was fighting a visiting army and navy. And this time around, Donald Trump is fighting an enemy that's already here. And so when I see that the debt ceiling needs to raise up by $4 trillion over the next 2 years, when I don't see, and I could be wrong, maybe this was adjusted, correct me please, no taxes on tips didn't make it into this one. I think it would be a larger conversation to get no taxes on Social Security didn't make it into this one. But, whenever you're going to do tax cuts, all you're really saying is the government's going to go without money it got from you. And that's a great thing fundamentally because we want a government that has to come to us and discuss big topics, right? They can't just print money. But if these days they're not getting money that they're used to getting, they're just going to print that money. And that's why the debt ceiling has to continue to raise up. So to me, and I'll end with this on response to your question, for someone who's just going to the ground with this, taking a farmer's approach, like just the plainest approach you could take to the economic numbers and the government and the economy and wages and inflation and the cost of commodities, just the simplest approach. If they are going to continue to print money, then they haven't cut any spending. They might be spending projectedly less than they had intended to before he came to town, but they're not cutting spending. And that breaks my heart because that's the only thing that saves the dollar and continues and stops the worsening for the American family and the American individual.
And that's a good point because the Congressional Budget Office did say with this bill, as they scored it, that it could add to the deficit. There is part of that reconciliation package did have the no tax on tips, at least a form of that. But this was something that, took kind of the last minute to get the whipped votes together in order for passage. So we'll see ultimately how President Trump addresses this when it gets to his desk. What do you think of his plans regarding the Trump gold card? So it's with Howard Lutnick at Commerce to re-envision the EB-5 visa, where these green cards and these worker cards would be basically sold at a price. They could be, say that you have all these countries purchasing them with how they want to propose it. It could be up to $50 trillion for the United States, according to the administration. Then in turn, we have roughly a $36 trillion debt or so. How realistic do you think that could come about in the next few months or a couple of years from now?
I think it's an interesting idea. And this is what you want. You want this kind of thinking in the White House. You want entrepreneurial, think outside the box. How does our economy flourish? What brings benefit down to the people? We want their paychecks to benefit. We don't just want the government to benefit. Reagan famously, I guess, was saying to Carter. Yeah, Carter. He said, the people, the government doesn't have an inflation people. The people do. A problem. Right? Like the government doesn't care if there's inflation. They don't care. They print money. It's the people that suffer when they do print money. And so anything that can bring revenue into the country that isn't, hurtful or harmful to the people that are already here is a great idea. My thought would be when I first heard that, great, let's stitch on for every person that pays the 5 million or whatever it was, billion or million, that they have to bring 10 people with them, 10 great people. That they open the door for 10 folks that have to deal with a 7-year naturalization process. You understand why these people just come across the Rio Grande? They've heard that it'll take 7 years for them to actually get to live here or be a citizen here. Who can go through that process if they aren't loaded in the bank? They don't have big bank accounts. We want common, awesome people to continue to move here. It would help offset the core of our economic problem, which is 70 million people retired starting in 1997. So if you can just like focus on that for a second, we never had a retirement cost of any note until 1997, 98. Then all of a sudden, for the first time in American financial history, we had a gigantic loss from the productivity side and a new cost we'd never had before, gigantic cost that worsens every year. And now the whole planet's dealing with this and no one talks about it. There's 917 million human beings on Earth of the 8 billion that are over 70.
And to that point, that's really interesting to dive into because President Trump has said at the CPAC conference and recently in other speeches that he wants to protect Social Security as it stands. And that's a launch from the left. You'll hear a lot of that from Democrats on the offensive, that Republicans want to dive into those funds. Are these funds sustainable ultimately? And how do we reform that and make sure that people are getting the benefits they've paid into, but also making sure we don't go bankrupt? Because even Elon Musk mentioned that during the cabinet meeting, that this is a moral issue. If the United States goes bankrupt, it's too soon, too late.
So I guess there might be a couple definitions for bankruptcy. One would be you're technically bankrupt. To me, the difference between Bernie Madoff and the federal government is that the federal government can print money. Imagine if Bernie could have printed money and paid those redemptions, those people wanting their money out of his fund. He would have never gotten discovered for what he was doing. But he couldn't print money, so he did get caught. So was he bankrupt? Did he go bankrupt? The government went bankrupt a long time ago. And if I could, I do have a Karl Rove approved whiteboard, and I've been talking about this all week. So when we look at real GDP, and I'll be quick, in 2021, the first year without Trump, GDP is $19.4 trillion. So if America Incorporated, and you counted all of its revenue, it did 19.4. In 2024, you can see there it did 23.4 trillion. So that's 4 trillion in GDP growth. Except you printed $8.8 trillion in those 4 years. So does that look like bankruptcy to you? Because that's not a profit. The economy shrank 4.4 trillion without the printed money. And then you look at the deficit for 2020, that 3 trillion folded into the 2021 numbers. 3 trillion just in 2020 alone. That folds into, I'm on the wrong hand here, the 19.4 million. I need more practice with this. So when we talk about bankruptcy, it's already there. It happened a long time ago. It happened in 2008, essentially, because without American printed money, we have a negative GDP for the last 17 years. So, oh my God, when do we feel this bankruptcy? When the ability to print money, when money has no more potency left in it, it's worth 2.7 cents today, the dollar. So when that potency reaches some mathematical place of half a penny, a tenth of a penny, maybe 1 penny, we don't know how long this actually lasts. And I know no one's talking about it. And you're sitting there going, how does Paul talk about this stuff like it's important when no one else who is important is talking about it? Because I don't think they're aware of it. I really don't think they're aware of it. I know Warren Buffett is saying, just keep saving $200 a month from every paycheck. And 40 years from now, you'll have a ton of money. I don't think so, because the dollar when he started doing that was worth 80 cents. And today it's worth 3. So that's the resource that allows us to communicate today, and me to put on a suit and talk and had a breakfast and a lunch today. Without the printed money, you don't have any of this. You have Bernie Madoff.
Yeah, some fantastic points there. And do you think there should be a balanced budget amendment that Congress really has to push forward in order to streamline and stop some of this printing of the money? Because even when I look at now, I'm turning 37 relatively soon. I look in my lifetime, to your point, the devaluing of our currency and the fact that it's harder to own properties or even a first home for many in my generation, between the millennials and the Gen Zers, and even some older, because it's just their own stock and savings, their assets against inflation becoming harder and harder. So how does the average person really handle this and stand up to what's going on in United States and world markets?
Offenses win when they go where the defense isn't. So if we're just going to sign up, your demographic, your age group, your generation. If you're thinking, well, I'm just going to go the way I've seen other people go, I'm gonna maybe have to go to college, so I'll take on some debt, and then I'll get that degree, which pays me more money when I get out of college than if I just went to high school, and then I'll get that payroll going, and I'll save some money, and I'll buy a house. And it can't happen because as the government prints, young man, it causes the cost to go higher every year. It's the government that prints the money because it doesn't have the money to pay for Social Security, Medicaid, and Medicare, all retiree-born costs. It doesn't have the money to pay those bills. And no one there is strong enough, long time ago, to say, hey, we need quality people to come here. When Social Security was created, there were 44 workers for a retiree. Today, there's 3. The government let all that slip. The government let all of that never get spoken about or worked on as a problem. When Reagan was president, he had the gravitas to come out and say, my fellow Americans, we need to invite good folks south of the Rio Grande to come live here. Although that might have sparked a little ire in people, and they may have been, and the politicians worried about sparking off some racism claims and all kinds of frenzy going off in America. But if they had come and said, here's the numbers in 2025, your dollar's worth 3 cents, you have $36 trillion, and you'll have crazy presidents like Biden and Obama changing you to have your kids to have talks in elementary school about what sex they're going to be. I think everyone in America would have said, oh my God, yeah, let's talk about this. We are a country of immigrants. We need more workers. We need more people living here. We need to do it fashionably. So the government can't stop printing this money. So what if we didn't go into this gerbil wheel of financial misery and we moved to the country, maybe with our college degree or didn't go get one, and we bought a small, tiny, meager house somewhere that we could afford it, and we actually found that happiness lived there too. Because how can you have happiness if you don't have peace? And you don't have peace if all you have is 7 days a week of stress and things that you want that you can't get, but you are the quality person to have those things like homes and cars paid for and no credit card debt. If you're the quality person that could have all that and you can't, then that's misery. And we're not even in the top 20th happiest countries on the planet. Google the list. We're 23rd. Kuwait is happier than we are. Kuwait. So when you look at what the challenges are for you guys in those younger generations, it can only get worse, brother. It can only get worse because the government's design for approaching problems like these is to print money, which creates problems they can never solve. So long ago, when we were all dealing with life and the drought came, we dealt with it. We got through it. It ended. When the plague came, it sucked and we lost lots of friends and family, but we got through it. It was temporary. The federal government isn't temporary. And that's why life can't change. So we have to change where we go. And this is the last shot. No one is going to bring probably more momentum, logic, reason, soundness than Elon Musk and Donald Trump and his administration against this slippage of erosion of American principles and fundamentals and just financial sanity. No one's going to bring a case harder against this momentum that they've been tracking on for over 30 years against us, the Americans that live here. It's evil. So last set of numbers on this point, just to articulate. In 1971, average income in America was $9,000. And guess how much a home cost? 18 grand. Twice your average income. How easy was that? It took 2 years to save to buy a house. And guess what? Mom didn't have to go to work or stay at work if she became a mom. She could check out of the workforce and raise kids because dad's income was enough. Today, the average home price is 440 grand. And it's skewed because there's a lot of printed money in these employment payroll numbers. But average income, if you kind of account for some of that, is around $48,000 a year. So the house is almost 10x your income. And it takes on average 8 years to buy a home. And those numbers are skewed because there's a lot of, if you catch that college degree and end up in financial services, there's only a few industries left in this country, and those are usually very high paying jobs, so it skews the numbers. But if we strip that out you might think it takes 14 years to save for a down payment to buy a home. You come out of college at 20 something, you ain't buying a home until you're 36. Wow. That's American erosion. That's where the American dream has disappeared a long time ago. Now it's just a memory. Trump working his ass off to bring that back. But those are the numbers. And numbers don't care if you're yelling from a podium. Bad math only turns into good math with a ton of good math getting mixed in. Raising the debt ceiling $4 trillion over the next 2 years is not part of good math. It's part of reality, but not good math.
Oh, no question about that. The numbers don't lie. And it's affecting every other area of life. I mean, we have people getting married later, population decrease, especially in certain demographics. And really, you only have people, I think maybe Tucker Carlson, Ron Paul, Rand Paul, perhaps Dennis Kucinich, Mike Lee, that come to mind instantly, who are really talking about how the debt is detrimental to the future of the culture and society as a whole. And as you mentioned, thank God for President Trump, thank God for Elon Musk, who are addressing it on top of all the other issues that they're facing between Doge, facing with the multitude of executive orders, and then further legislation as well, roughly within give or take 40 days in office. Now, it's just breaking news as we're talking now, but you might have caught the meeting with President Trump, President Zelensky of Ukraine, and then that press conference that did not happen. The bilateral meeting looks like it failed, at least temporarily, and Mr. Zelensky left the White House. Apparently, he was speaking to President Trump, wanting to stay for that, but sparks flew in the Oval Office, and rightfully so, as this was not going to be an easy discussion. How does the talk of gold and silver and precious commodities come into play in a situation like this for any given, individual in the United States?
Gold was $300 an ounce when the baby boomers started retiring at the turn of the century, and it's tapping on 3,000 an ounce today. So what does that say? That's just a measurement of the erosion. It continues to worsen with worldwide instability as governments everywhere struggle, fail. They fail at working with their people and their businesses and their economies to produce enough revenue to cover the costs of the country, because the whole world owes $303 trillion to itself. And so when we look at more specifically to Zelensky's behavior, he should have, his first step ought to have been, we are so grateful that we don't have to have a Russian flag flying over our capital today, and it's because of Europe and the Americans. And we'd really like this war to end and the slaughter of our brave men and women to stop. And we'd like to rebuild our apartment buildings and our power plants and our roads and stuff, schools and hospitals. Instead, he's kind of just acting like he's got it going on. He doesn't really need it. I mean, I understand Putin's the stronger, person in the room than Zelensky, right? So you gotta, I can see that Trump, perhaps, I'm just suspecting, is paying a little more airtime to that and recognizing that has to be featured and Zelensky has to be the beta and Putin kept as the alpha. And he's not liking that, but that's not going to go well. Wars and life itself is always about resources, access to resources and maintaining them. Why isn't Tom Brady throwing a football on an NFL field anymore? He lost the resource of youth. I lost the resource of hair. So when we look at how desperate all of this becomes for China, they have more homes that no one lives in than we have homes in America. I think I have that right. It's so astounding. It's hard to believe. I've read it from a few different sources. They have more empty homes that no one will live in China than we have homes in America, total. So when you just look at how the world's just breaking apart, it's fracturing as our weakness continues, our financial dominance. So I think you need gold and silver because it's not money in the dollar. You need gold and silver because it's not money in some institution you have to rely on continuing to provide you with access to your money, or a bad Microsoft update goes down and the world bugs out and you can't get on a plane or a bus or get access to your funds. I mean, who knows? The world with more and more tech the world becomes more and more precarious on things it doesn't fully understand or control or see warning signs of before it breaks. At least a bridge will start sending little creaky sounds to you as you drive over it that maybe it needs some repair work done. When software goes down, boom, it's out. And this move to cryptocurrency, if someone hacks your crypto account, is there an 800 number you can call to get it back? No. No. What are we talking about here? You can't hack gold and silver.
Yes, some excellent points from Mr. Paul Stone, CEO of Colonial Metals Group. And the proof is in the pudding. Since 1971, if you get the free gold guide, you can get that at freegoldguide.com/RSBN. It shows you how gold has gone up over 7,000% since the end of the gold standard by the Nixon administration in 1971 until just last year. It's never dipped down significantly. It's only been an upward trend. So thank you for the common sense points, and we look forward to having you back on Right Side Broadcasting Network live very soon. Thank you to Mr. Paul Stone.
Thank you for having me. You guys are doing incredible work. God bless you all, and I appreciate your courage and all your hard work.
Likewise, sir. God bless you. Thank you.
Thank you.